Okay, we're calling the meeting to order, the Historic Preservation Committee meeting. Public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters on the agenda for action. Each person has up to 5 minutes to speak on a specific item. While this is public comment period, I will allow public comment on each agenda item. So as we move forward, you'll see the agenda, it's numbered. And if you have a comment that you want to make, wait until we're through with the presentations and then you can come forward for public comment. Make sure that you give us your name in full so that we have the record for the minutes. Okay. At this time, we have approval of the minutes of the August 8th, 2019 special meeting.
Yeah. Oh. Madam Chairwoman, maybe just check to see if anybody does want to speak at the initial public comment period.
Okay. Does anyone want to come forward for public comment at this time before we get started? Okay, then we'll go ahead and proceed. Thank you. All right. Approval of the minutes of the August 8th, 2019 special meeting. Are there any additions or corrections? Okay, hearing none, then we have to have someone make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll move to approve the minutes of the, I believe it was the August 8th.
That's correct. Okay. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor say aye. Aye. Okay.
Aye.
Okay. Oh, thanks you guys down there calling in. All right. Courtesy review of a request to purchase part of an unused alley right-of-way by the adjacent owner of 555 Avenue G.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. John and Alice Sterling are selling the property they own at 555 Avenue G, which is zoned multiple family. And as buyers were inquiring about the property, it was discovered that certain structures had been built over part of a city right-of-way to the east of the property, which the applicant has had an easement approval for over 30 years from the city to have walls, which have basically blocked off that very narrow little alley for more than 30 years. However, the easement agreement only allowed for the walls and for basically him to use it as ingress, egress. And since there's a carport and a landing that partially encroaches over the alley, they would like to clean that up now by being able to purchase their half of the alley, basically that they've been using for the past 30 years. And so in order to do that, the city would need to vacate the alley and sell them the property. The first step was getting authorization from the council for an appraisal. And when that went to the council in June, one member, who is now our current mayor, objected to that and had concerns because the alley was in the historic district. And so although this will not necessarily influence the council's decision, we're bringing this forward to you, or rather the applicant requested to come before the committee basically for a courtesy review, just to see if the committee has, in fact, any opinion as to whether or not the alley that hasn't been in public use for more than 30 years should stay under public ownership. Relative to the guidelines, that the committee has adopted and the parameters of the code, alleys really, and streets aren't technically under the committee's purview, but checking into the matter, the nomination to the National Register barely mentions alleys at all. It does mention extensive pedestrian walkways through the historic district, but as you can see from the photos, it looks like there's plenty of sidewalk area, around this property, as well as the streets in this very small block area that provide for all these years adequate public access in the area. So The applicant is present in case you've got any questions for him. And again, if the committee cares to make a recommendation to the city council on the issue of the historic aspect of the alley, you're welcome to do that.
Okay,
Good evening.
good evening.
My name is Roger Harris. I'm a Boulder City resident. I've lived here 27 years. I'm also an attorney. I've been an attorney in Boulder City for 25 years. The owner of the property adjacent to this property is John Sterling, this gentleman to my right. He's been a resident of Boulder City for 45 years. For 45 years. In addition to the photographs that you were given in your package by Susan, I brought in some larger photographs that I'd like to introduce to you and give you a little more familiarity with the property, and then maybe follow that up with a little historical perspective on the property and what Mr. Sterling's intentions are. So if I may proceed with that.
Please do.
Okay. First of all, and I don't know if I can move around because I don't know where the cameras are.
Stand where you were standing in front of the podium, please, and hold it right in front of you, and I can zoom in on it.
Sure, okay. This first photograph that I'm showing you, okay, is a photograph depicting the property and the alleyway. It's looking southwards towards Wyoming Street. The 12 feet, which is displayed by the green tape, is the area in question. It's 12 feet wide by 70 feet long. In addition to this, I'm going to show you another photograph that when Mr. Forbes gave the easement to Mr. Sterling, he also gave an easement to Mr. Sterling's neighbor who lives behind. This is the area between Wyoming Street and G Street. It's sort of across from the credit union. If you turn to the right rather than to the left, that's the property. But like I say, this is looking at the property in question from the front, from G Street, and this shows exactly how much we're seeking today. We're seeking to purchase from the city 12 feet wide by 70 feet long. This is a photograph from Wyoming Street, looking north towards G Street, towards Arizona. This is the alley as it behind Mr. Sterling's house. Okay, the easement was given to the Quinns. As you can see from the wall here, this was permitted by the easement that was given by Mr. Forbes in 1987. But this is a look at how the alley is today. And all this alley is used for, or walkway is used for currently, is for parking for the Quinns, correct? Right. All right, so that's that one. Two more photographs for you to look at. This is a view east to the, what used to be, it's a parking lot which I think the city owns now, or they own part of it. This was where Bill Smith's big building was, over there on the corner of Utah and Wyoming, and this is the parking lot. So regarding the walkway, which, because I noticed with the National Park Service plan, as Susan said, they didn't talk about alleys too much, but they did talk about walkways, and they did commend the city on their walkway structure and how easily accessible everything was in the historic district. But I wanted to use this photograph to point out to you that about 3 feet to the east, okay, is this parking lot, which is easily walked through and accessible right now to the public, if they wanted to walk from Wyoming to the courthouse or something. And this final picture that I want to show you is looking westward, gives you another view of the block wall, okay, and the property, which is Mr. Sterling's property, located on G Street. This shows the wall, and like I say, this is 12 feet that we're seeking looking westward on that. Those are the photographs that I wanted to supplement your package with. In addition, I have a couple comments before your questions, if you have any questions. When I got this assignment, I went to the National Park Service guidelines and rules on the preservation of historic districts. And first thing I did, being an attorney, is I Googled and looking for the answer, and I couldn't find anything regarding alleys in that. The word alley just wasn't around. So I went a little further, and I looked at preservation partnerships, because this is something which is in the National Park Service guidelines. And if I may, I'd just like to read to you a brief paragraph as to what they say about partnerships, private and public partnerships. And it sort of touches on the whole theme of the historic district. Preserving our historic and cultural heritage is vitally important to our collective identity as Americans. And at the heart of why we designate national historic areas, having a site designated as a National Historic District is a huge accomplishment. However, designation does not magically protect and maintain your site or bring visitors flocking up to your door. With the cacophony of budget cuts, competing priorities, and constant distractions, it is not getting easier to ensure that our significant historic and cultural stories continue to be told. National historic landmarks are recognized by the Secretary of the Interior as outstanding representations of historic innovations or events that had a significant impact on our entire country. But NHLs first had an impact in their local community. So Mr. Sterling is not seeking to change the preservation of the district at all. He has lived there for 35 years, or he doesn't live there anymore, but he lived there for 12 years?
Where?
On G Street.
Well, I bought that in '77, moved out there in '90, that'd be 13 years.
He lived there for 13 years. He complied with what the city did as far as the easement goes. And now he wants to sell the property, but he wants to take care of this and purchase this area from the city. Okay, and we think the public restoration or the public preservation of this area will not decrease or in any way have a bad effect on the historic district. That the value, the preservation value will not be impaired at all by Mr. Sterling's ownership. So we'll take any questions if there is any.
Okay, any questions or comments?
I'll make a comment. First of all, I think Mr. Sterling should be allowed to buy the horse is out of the barn, so to speak, and has been that way for 30 years. I don't see why we should change that now, but I attended the city council meeting last night, and this type of problem seems to be common within Boulder City, where easements have been allowed at some period of time, encroachments into city property, and then over time, 30 years or whatever, they change. And instead of being a wall, they build a building, or instead of a fence, they build a... So I don't object to Mr. Sterling selling the property. Especially in this case. I walk up and down that place all the time. I didn't know there was a sidewalk there. So it isn't a big deal. But I do think that it deserves the council and perhaps even the Historic Preservation Committee looking into this business of granting easements for private use of public property, and then it's sort of ignored, and 20 or 30 years later you come up with a problem, and you're kind of stuck with it. So. But I don't object to Mr. Sterling selling his property.
Yeah, my name's John Sterling. I tried to purchase that property from the city in 1983 through Mr. Forbes. At that time, the people to the east of me, which would have been the New Life Foundation, wanted to buy half of that 12-foot of alley. And Mr. Forbes said at that time, I don't want to open up a can of worms. I'm going to give you an easement. It's for your use. Well, I thought it was for my use, but dealing with Susan over here, she explained to me that I got 2 foot of my porch up on the landing on the city. I got a tough shed. I had a contractor build a carport for covered parking for the renters. Now the alley's the alley's still there. All I did was fill it in, grade it down, so that historic alley is still, and I'm not gonna tear it up, it's there. So, if you have any other questions about it.
I'd just like to say thanks for coming before us, and I want you to know that I support you in your effort, and I agree with everything that Charles just said. I think it's time to do the right thing there.
I appreciate that.
And I also support you in your purchase of the property. Good luck.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions from the committee? Okay.
It's Alan, I have a comment.
We've got a comment down here.
As far as bringing it from the historic committee, I mean, I think the historic value of that alley is kind of disappeared in the sense there's really no alley, there's no building next to it, and the access there is easy and free. And I think just to take care of this and grant him his wish and send it back to the city council.
Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you for coming.
Take my pictures.
This is Blair, and I only have one question. Was
Sir,
curious
we
if
have
the-
one more question here. We have 2 people on telephone. So-
That's Blair?
Yeah, Blair, I'm
Okay.
sorry. Go ahead. Blair, go ahead.
Can the, just as a matter of record, can the easement be sold with the property rather than the owner buying the land or the property and then selling it?
The easement cannot be.
Can the easement still remain?
Yeah,
with the sale of the
I
property?
still have the easement, and the easement cannot be dished over to the person that wants to buy it.
I'm sorry, Blair,
And why is that?
I'm sorry, Blair, could you clarify the question?
Can an owner who has an easement sell that easement with the property?
No.
Well,
I think it's in the easement that says it was designated just for Mr. Sterling,
yeah, the easement.
37 years ago.
Yeah, the easement agreement does basically have a cancellation clause. I mean, it states that if the city wanted to revoke the easement and use the property for its own purposes, it could do that at any time with 30 days notice. So I would imagine that the easement could transfer, but in this case, it makes more sense since the applicant has structures over the property. He'd like to clean it up basically. So what would happen in this case is that, he would compensate the city by buying the alley so he could get permits for those structures, and we would legally vacate that part of the alley so it would no longer be a right-of-way and wouldn't be encumbered by the easement.
Okay, thank you.
All right, very good. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next possible action item, presentations by respondents to original airport site reutilization requests for proposals, 1401 Boulder City Parkway. Okay, and what we're going to do is we'll have those come forward as they are given in the book here. So, yes.
Hi, this is Alan.
Oh, wait, Alan, go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to make a comment. I have to recuse myself from this agenda item because I am part of the Bullocksfield Coalition, and I feel like it's appropriate for me to recuse myself from the discussion. Thank you.
And Madam Chairwoman, I do have an intro presentation.
Okay.
Before we bring up the applicant.
All right, very good. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, Michael, go ahead.
So Holly, if we could have at the introduction 3 for the PowerPoint presentation. So since the expiration of the lease at the end of 2018 for the old airport hangar, there's been a lot of public interest in the hangar and the adjacent runway. The 8,000 square foot hangar and the former runway is located at 1401 Boulder City Parkway. In March of this year, the city issued a RFI, request for information. That RFI was contained in your packet. It spelled out the parameters for the possible lease of the hangar and adjacent land. It also spelled out other parameters and requirements for the city to consider the potential lease of both the hangar and the runway. Representatives for each of the proposals that submitted a response in May are here to present to you their proposal and answer questions. They include Bullock Field Coalition, Dandy Horse Ranch, and Litchin's proposals. The role for the committee this evening is to evaluate how well each of the applicants responded to one of the criteria contained in the request for information. Specifically, that the city would favor responses that preserve and promote the historical significance of the airport, that the adaptive reuse techniques are utilized, for the preservation of the hangar. And before we ask the applicants to come up, do you have any questions of staff?
Michael, could you describe to us how the city put out the RFI? How did the city try to reach potential lessees? I've noticed that the respondents are they are all locals, Boulder City people. So I'm wondering, did the general Southern Nevada area where, was, how well was it publicized, or how did you do that?
Yeah, the city's purchasing manager has a process to submit requests for RFIs as well as requests for proposals and bids in standard publications throughout Southern Nevada, publishing it in the local newspapers. I do know that when the RFI went out, he did receive many inquiries from different parties throughout Southern Nevada, but we did have just the 3 respondents to the RFI.
Thank you.
Okay, so Michael, do you want to handle the applicants coming up, or should I?
You could just, I guess, start with requesting the Bullock Field Coalition representative to come forward and present their proposal.
Okay, Bullock Field Coalition response to proposal. So could you come forward?
So you're stuck with 2. We're both Boulder City residents. Me for a few years.
Please state your names.
Yeah, my name is Rob Martin. I live over in Georgia. Mike has been here pretty much forever, but I don't know.
I'm older than dirt. I'm Michael Giroux. I am a resident of Boulder City.
Yeah, and we've actually been talking to people for, ever since this came out, or even before then a little bit, on a lot of this stuff. So it might be useful for you and even for the audience to talk about what we did for due diligence, to talk about the hangar. We have actually a number of other components that we think are important to make the project successful. But the focus for this committee, at least as I understand it, I did check with Michael Mays on this, is to talk about just really the hangar itself as far as any kind of details. So that's going to be our focus for the moment. So, what we did is we've met with, 10, 20, 30 people in Boulder City over the last year or two. Alan Goya is part of the group. So is obviously Mike and Scott Hansen and many other people in Boulder City. And we've been trying to brainstorm on what would be fun, what would be nice, what could work, and what would be, part of the history of Boulder City. And that's where we've tried to go. And I've had the building opened up 2 or 3 times. I've walked it, I've measured it. I've been trying to figure out what I think could work or couldn't work. And I've done some development myself, not as much as Mike, but some. So here's what we looked at when we first looked at it. It's called Bullock Field because of a guy named Bullock, who was alive in the 30s when the runway was created. But frankly, by the time the hangar happened, he had passed away. He was killed in an airplane accident in Southeast Asia before then. The Navy actually built a hangar in around 40, 41, something like that. And it was for PBYs to learn how to practice landing and taking off as they trained people in the Boulder City area. But for whatever reason, there was either too much wind or this or that, and the Navy decided they didn't even like it. So they never really even used it. So at that point, I had to decide, where are we going to go with this? And what would make sense? Because I really do want to, I've lived in Nevada since 1963, so I care. And I've loved Boulder City the whole time. I only moved to Southern Nevada in 70, but I've been here a long time. And so we tried to look at things, and one of the major themes we have is to try to create an atmosphere that is, reverential for Boulder City itself. And I think the best way to do that is to restore the hangar. And I think all the proposals want to do that. But what we would suggest is there's that very large wall on the backside of the hangar that could be a very large piece of art. And I think that would be the right way to go. And then we'll talk about the concept for the hangar here in a minute. But that way, whether it's, I think it should be the dam either fully constructed, viewed from the bottom from the Colorado River, or partially constructed with a crane over the top using something called a trompe-l'oeil technique, which is a way to try to make it look more three-dimensional when you see the wall, which I think could be and should be lovely. And I've actually met with a guy who, that's what he does, is trompe-l'oeils. He's out of, Truckee, California. So, there's lots of really neat, cool things that could be done to preserve the heritage of Boulder City while redoing the hangar and making it nice. Now, as part of the hangar being redone, that will require significant construction to just whichever proposal we're talking about. If you're actually going to use the hangar, you've got to insulate it, you've got to put HVAC in, you've got to build restrooms. None of those things exist at this moment. It's a hangar. That's the only way the Navy built it at the time. It was just to keep the PBYs that need to be repaired out of the sun for a little while where they had to repair the PBYs. So we've looked at all of that kind of thing, and what we came up with as a concept is a way to make, the old hangar, Bullock Field hangar, an entertainment center that has 4 or 5 major components. The most important one is something called an ice rink, but it's not a typical ice rink. A normal size ice rink is about 200 by 60, a little less than that, but real close to that. The hangar is not compatible with anything that size, but there is something called a 3-on-3 hangar. A 3-on-3 hangar is about a half-size ice rink that you can still utilize for all kinds of things. You can have fun with it. It could be a real asset for Boulder City, and it could be fun. In a lot of ways, I've actually met with a couple of high-up guys at Golden Knights, and they like the idea. And they're building the 2 hangars over in Henderson right now, by the way. And so with the 3-on-3 rink, you're offering a venue both for Boulder City and for the area, which would be very good for everything. And then we've got the art behind it, and it could be wonderful. Now, the cool thing about an ice rink of this size is it's fairly easy to cover it. And by that I mean there's this material you can buy that's about, I don't know, an inch and a half thick, It's got foam on the bottom, plywood on the top, and you can make that, things like a dance floor for parties or that kind of thing, and then you just open up the ice rink. So you've got 5 or 10 feet wide on top of that. And by the way, one of the things I want to do is, if we get this on, I'm going to be able to raffle off tickets so you can drive the Zamboni when you're trying to redo the ice. Okay, that'll be kind of fun. Anyway, so with that, what you do is you can do all kinds of things with it. You can make it, a wedding venue. You can do all kinds of things, whether that be things like small concerts, and we'll talk about that in a sec, and things along those lines. But the point being, there's a lot of things you can do to preserve both the historic feel and to make this thing work very well. Mike is up here in part because his most important focus is not really this committee at the moment, and that is to try to help create workforce housing, which is very good for the city of Boulder City. That's certainly in our proposal and are a number of other things, but that's not the focus for tonight. The focus for tonight is simply the hangar and making it not only an ice rink, but an event center and preserving Boulder City history, which this will do. For instance, one of the things we would do is make a natural amphitheater where you can, I'm a pilot too, so you can open the doors on this all the way. So the hangar's roughly 100 by 100, more or less, a little less than that, but real close. But you can fully open the doors, so you have the whole 100 feet open. And that can be a natural sound stage for putting some grass and some, auditorium outside stuff, where you build it up and you tier it over the next 50 to 100 feet to the south. And it could be really pretty, and it could be a great event center for, 2,000-3,000, probably not more than that, because you're going to limit how many, you got to do it parking and that kind of stuff. But it could be a very great small event center that could work quite well. You grass it, you make it nice, you do a lot of landscaping around it, you make it really pretty. But those would be actually the major components of the hangar itself. Let me make sure I've kind of covered the important point. There's a lot of other things here. There'd be a little Airstream hotel, there'd be a mini storage, there's actually the workforce housing that I've talked about. There's other things, but they aren't really relevant to this discussion. What's really, important is how do you preserve the really neat thing about Boulder, the airport. I did forget one thing when I was talking about the airport. I did look into Howard Hughes was involved in the airport at one point, because a couple people had suggested that to me. I don't know how many people know, but the only time Howard Hughes was out here, he killed a couple of people when he ditched a plane in the lake many, many years ago. So I'm not even sure I even want to go there. But one of the things we absolutely would do is, I've talked to some people, you do 1/32 models of existing size of aircrafts. You hang them from that tall ceiling and you spot them with lights. So at night you can do different things to highlight them, and we tell a story about the airport itself as well as tell the story about Boulder City. And I don't know how much of this you want me to go into, but we've thought through it a lot, and we think it could work very well, and we actually think it would make sense and be great for Boulder City. But at that point, Mike, do you want to say anything?
Well, I think you've pretty much covered. Remember, it was a request for information. So we pooled together a group of people spearheaded by Alan Goya, and we just came up with concepts that we feel the community needs, and that a substantial investment would have to be made into this hangar. Bringing it up to code, making it usable. And so if you're going to, historic is very important, but with the amount of money that would have to be put into it to use it, of course it's going to have to be modernized with a historic feel. The other items on our list, like I said, were just requests for information.
And I think each of the people should get to present, and then any questions you've got after you've listened to the proposals, we look forward to that.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Michael, Would it be appropriate now for us to ask questions?
Absolutely.
Okay. Could you please come back to the podium?
Go ahead.
So the purpose of the RFI, I'll just read it out for you all here. Purpose of the RFI, city seeks proposals, information on potential development and/or operational ideas for the airport. Central to city consideration of potential uses is the preservation of the hangar and how the hangar building and land would be used by the lessee. Additionally, the city will favor responses that use the airport for public purposes that draw new visitors to the city. The city will favor responses that preserve and promote the historical significance of the airport, that adaptive reuse techniques are utilized for the preservation of the hangar. The city will favor proposals that are innovative in the quality and design of the proposed architectural improvements. The city will not entertain aviation uses. Your proposal for a ice rink is a very small part of your response to the RFI. The majority of your response is really for development of housing. And this is not something that will bring new visitors to Boulder City. It seems that you've put a lot of effort into potential housing opportunities, and you're also not only asking for the 22 acres, you're asking for, in my estimation, 49 acres in total in your response, which I find, inappropriate myself. But just getting back to the ice rink, there are 7 ice rinks in Las Vegas, and there's a 20+ million ice rink going to open just down the road. And I don't think that an ice rink is going to work in Boulder City. It's not going to draw people from Las Vegas. I made some inquiries. There's no 3-on-3 teams out there, no leagues. There's basically nobody out there that will come and use this place. And I have reached out to the CEO of the Las Vegas Ice Center, John Brooks, and he laughed when I told him about the prospect of having an ice rink in Boulder City and it being a 3-on-3 size. So I don't think that's a good idea, personally. I just want to express that. But I'm also disappointed at the great deal of attention that you've put into proposed housing development. And also you're asking for 10 to 15 acres of land to be donated to you, which I find ludicrous. It's got nothing to do with the hangar, historic preservation. It's about development, a land grab, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want us to respond to that? Okay.
Yes, if you'd like to, please.
Yeah, no, Ray, I thank you. Obviously, I've talked to you a lot on different things. There is definitely a large housing component to this. But I've done, obviously, some due diligence. I've done a lot of development over the years. And I've definitely talked to the Golden Knights. There are no 3-on-3 rinks in Vegas. There are something like 80 of them around the country that do very well. And I've actually talked to the manager, too, of those. And simply, we would be competition. The Golden Knights like the idea, by the way. A 3-on-3 rink actually has a different feature than regular size ice rinks. That's basically to help people develop their skills. They're actually fairly good hockey players because they're not skating the whole rink to learn how to shoot and run and check and that kind of thing. So there's actually always has been a need for 3-on-3 rinks, and they exist all over the country. I appreciate you've tried to do some due diligence, which is wonderful. But I love the idea, and I don't know who you asked about it, but the neat thing about this size complex is you can open it up, you can make it an amphitheater, and you can do many other different things with it. But a good chunk of the time it will be an ice rink. And in the summer, for kids in Boulder City that don't have very far to go, it would be fun. and you'd learn how to skate. I mean, I learned how to skate because I grew up back east a long time ago. But, it would, I think it'd be kind of a cool thing. I'm sorry about your concern. There's no land grab here. There would be some component, especially for the workforce housing, that would include some kind of grant from the city, but that's really not, the only thing we're talking about to you is historic preservation. That's really a city council issue, and we look forward to addressing that then, but that's frankly not within the purview or the jurisdiction of this committee. And if you want, I can spend, 20, 30 minutes explaining why it makes sense. It also has to do with the way the parcel works. There's a large easement for a drainage ditch that's not really part of the property at all, that doesn't work. I don't think, I'm not sure you even want to get into the details in this. I've looked at this real closely last year or two. And this is probably something that would work and could be great for Boulder City. And, we don't get to have a land grab no matter what, because that will have to be appraised and in some fashion resolved. But again, that's not the historic committee's, venue. But I appreciate your comments. Any questions on that?
Well, the purpose of the RFI is to find a use for a historic property. Now, you've taken the liberty of turning it into a development issue, a proposal for massive development. And you've also suggested that you would be gifted 10 to 15 acres of land, which in my estimation, based on the type of housing that you described, fourplex, rentals, possibly 150 units. That's quite excessive. That's not workforce housing related to this project. I think you've taken great liberties with the RFI, and that's my opinion. Also, when it comes to the 3-on-3 rinks, the reason there aren't any 3-on-3 rinks is you only need half of a standard-sized rink to do 3-on-3. You don't have to build a special rink to do 3-on-3. They simply use half of an existing rink, and there's no demand for it out there. And we have too many ice rinks in Las Vegas as it is. So we're not going to draw people to town with an ice rink and the occasional dance or concert. We have all that down the hill. Why are people going to come here for, the other thing is you have the example you have in here for the amphitheater, which is a massive amphitheater, 1,500 to 2,000 people. It looks just like the amphitheater at the library. So how many events do we have at that amphitheater? Why do we need another one when that one's underused as it is? And just pointing out, you're here to talk to us about your proposal. Your proposal includes massive development, and we have every right to address that and give our opinions. So my opinion is that this proposal is grossly inappropriate.
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else at the moment?
Yeah, and just the historic preservation part, I did like the Trompe l'Oeil painting will be the depiction of the Boulder Dam approximately 3/4 of the way through construction, including a crane element. I think that is a really great idea as far as historic preservation.
I don't have anything right now. I'm going to wait to hear all three, and then I'd like to respond. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, now we'll move on to the Dandy, let's see. Got to find it here, the actual name of the next request.
It's the Dandy Horse.
Yeah, Dandy Horse, that's right.
Ranch proposal.
Oh, thank you for coming.
Howdy.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, committee members. Really excited to be here. My name is Chris Gagne. I am not a Boulder City resident. I am a Clark County resident. I'm also here with Grant Turner, as you guys will know. And what I would like to do is talk to you guys about the Dandy Horse, our proposal, and just give you some background as to the name to begin with. The idea is to try and make a connection. We okay? The idea is to try to make a connection between the history of cyclery that's already here and very well represented in Boulder City, and also connect it to the history of aviation. The dandy horse is a really early term for bicycles in the 18th century, mainly in London and in Paris. And I thought it was a very interesting, playful place to start. Today we're speaking specifically about historic preservation. In my opinion, historic preservation is an approach, not necessarily a solution. And so on top of talking about the dandy horse, I'm going to go into some precedents of other airport redevelopments that I think are good. I'm just going to read from the RFI that we responded to, keep it to the point. We intend to convert the airport hangar into an event venue, as well as develop the surrounding land to be utilized as a combination motor coach resort and modern mobile housing. The event venue. I'm going to flick to the side here. This is a site plan of the not only the current hangar site and the 20 or so acres that are associated with the RFI, but obviously we're looking at the entirety of the area and trying to connect it all. The event venue improvements to the airport hangar would include a 4,500 square foot, 2-story mezzanine, food and beverage establishment with views of a stage, new lighting, HVAC, stage, audio-visual system, and commissary kitchen attached to the hangar. I like that. That's something that Grant operationally had really focused on, that we're not actually touching the interior of the hangar. Obviously there's the mezzanine, but that the structure itself would be maintained to stay open, and that kind of any ancillary function would be handled in adjacent structures. The event space of this size and scope, which does not currently exist in Boulder City, would provide the potential for a virtually limitless variety of events and considerable revenue to aid Boulder City's overall economic vitality. Parking grounds to be determined. The motor coach resort, which would be the orange element on the site plan, would be 75 RV spaces across roughly 8 acres and a 5,000 square foot clubhouse that you'll see in the middle there. Highly amenitized RV resort with oversized lots and a higher price point complements a proven market concept in Boulder City. Opportunity to create a unique experience-based destination, drawing new visitors to town. Modern mobile housing, that is the blue element. 75 units on 10 acres, compatible with R8 zoning. During construction of Hoover Dam, hundreds of houses were constructed in Boulder City in an area commonly referred to as the Avenues to provide housing for the dam workers. This workforce housing survives to this day. For years, these houses have provided and continue to provide many people with their first home. This workforce housing was the inspiration for a community of modern mobile houses. Although the modern mobile home product type is new to Boulder City, the concept of mobile housing in the area is well established. Communities such as Gingerwood serve as a precedent for quality mobile housing in the immediate vicinity, and that's just to the north there. Beyond our development team, our partner strategy would have key relationships with the City of Boulder, Regional Transportation Commission, UNLV School of Architecture that I am very involved in, the School of Architecture at Taliesin, that's Frank Lloyd Wright's School of Architecture in Phoenix, which I'm also involved in. On the private side, we'll have capital investment partners, adjacent property owners, and local businesses, commercially, banks, modular home manufacturers, and national brands. This proposal was for a lease, not a sale. So we're obviously looking at that because that's what the city asked for. So anticipated lease term. Typically, in a development of this size and scope, purchasing the land outright would be necessary to justify the considerable investment and infrastructure required to develop the area. A long-term lease allows for ample time to absorb the initial infrastructure cost. We go into more detail, but basically we just, we're here to work with the city and go into those terms as we go further down the process. We have detailed responses to restroom and vehicle access, that if anybody has questions, I can respond to that. And then, most importantly, we really focus on the cost and infrastructure. What we're talking about today, I've broken it down into basically phase one. I don't know if you guys can see these numbers, but the point being that everything that we're describing has physical realities and financial realities that we want to start to address now, not later. And I feel as though the approach that we've taken so far budgetarily is actually pretty accurate. It's all based upon real numbers and real precedent. I would like to, in terms of historic preservation, or in our team, excuse me, my name is Chris Gagne again. Not here with us today is Rob Piccoli, who's one of my partners on several things that I've done downtown in Las Vegas. Larry Turner, who is a 38-year Boulder City resident and residential commercial developer. Grant Turner, Boulder City born and raised, background in finance, design, construction, and event operation. I have lots of detail of all the different projects that we have done in terms of historic preservation, both here and in other cities. However, I would like to just talk about some precedents of comparable projects. This is Stapleton. This is Denver, Colorado. You can see Denver in the bottom left-hand image. The airport was originally built in 1929. It is roughly 4,700 acres. I have personally visited the site quite a few times. I'm a big soccer fan. There's a great soccer stadium and facilities that they built there for the local soccer team. This is a massive, massive development. And the reason I'm showing it isn't the size and scope. It's more about, once again, it's an approach. And in particular, I just focused on one of the original hangars that is there. That is a 32,000 square foot former terminal building. They maintain the tower. A local restaurant group called Punch Bowl Social was already well established in downtown Denver and took over the space. They really turned it up. There's bowling lanes and whatnot in there. But the images that I picked were trying to show how they kept it industrial, how they honored the buildings that were there, and worked not only with the history of the architecture that's there, but kind of took it to a different place. And in my opinion, that's kind of part of historic preservation. Like, these things have to be activated as well, not just antiques. The image on the top right-hand side is a band shell. That's part of the development there. The former plane up there is actually a ice cream stand. This is the Mueller. This is just south of Austin. This was airport built in 1930. It was operational until 1999. I focused here in particular on the Browning hangar, which is from the 30s, and how this, once again, very large development, 700 acres, mixed use, you name it, there. But the way they honored the existing hangar and the way they basically honored the architecture and didn't really touch it, they've just activated it. So there's a farmer's market every Sunday, lots of different events. It's a really great project, and I look forward to checking it out next month when I'm down there. Last but not least, this is the Tempelhof in Berlin. I was lucky enough to fly out of this airport with my wife before it closed down. It's really beautiful. It shut down, or it was originally built in 1923. It shut down in 2008. What's really interesting about this one is that they have not done anything. So the proposal that you see on the left was a master plan that went before the city. It got shot down. It was very high density. All the colored material that you see, that's all very high density construction, multi-family, you name it. But what was interesting to me is that they left the field open, right? And that they left the runways open. The entire project isn't going anywhere, but the city has basically used the terminal as an event space. So on the image on the top right, you see a black tie event, and on the image next to it, you see a Ferris wheel and whatnot. They're celebrating the Berlin airlift, and that's one of my favorite things about what they've done. They put an old C-47 Douglas out there in front, honoring the history of the Berlin airlift. I also would point out the image on the bottom right, which I think is brilliant. they've basically created paths, right? Running, cycling, and I believe inline skating. And they give you a sense of what it would be like to be out there and be on wheels. And that kind of goes back to what I was originally saying with the Dandy Horse and kind of the history. Obviously, we've been talking a lot about Nelson Bullock. He's really, really interesting. Won the Pikes Peak race in 1922 with a homemade car called the Tin Lizzie that we all know well today. And that DIY culture is here. It's very present in Boulder City. A lot of Grant's work manifests that, and I'm always been really brought to it. The Wright brothers were obviously originally a bicycle shop in Dayton, Ohio. Glenn Curtis was a bicycle manufacturer as well. I love this idea of this bike-centric community on the Dandy Horse, and I would love the opportunity to honor the history here, and specifically of the Bullock Hangar. Last slide said thank you.
Okay, any comments? Well, yes.
Yes,
Go
Larry.
ahead.
What the images of the 1940 to 55 apartment preservation and
Oh,
remodel.
I'm sorry, I missed the
were?
slide. I apologize, I missed the slide. Sorry, these are, so I have about 5 apartment buildings in downtown Las Vegas. I have been methodically restoring them. I was one of the few people that were restoring apartments downtown. Now it's certainly caught on. I've done new construction downtown as well. A new building that was just called the Lucy. It was actually on the front page of the New York Times art section, which I was very proud of. The project on the bottom right is called the Pioneer. That was a 1955 apartment complex that I renovated. I won the Mayor's Urban Design Award that year for that project, and we've continued to go down. So just showing you the level of detail that we go into when we renovate and restore, and even down into the signage, and those are hand-painted, hand-lettered signs that I use, and try and keep it appropriate to the time. I would go into all kinds of crazy detail about the linoleum floor that I put in there. It was very difficult to track that stuff down. So sorry I missed that slide, but just showing you, obviously everyone's very familiar with Grant's historic preservation, but wanted to show you a few examples of what I've been up to.
And are those apartments within a historic district, or did you work with the Historic Preservation Commission in Las Vegas
unfortunately,
on that work?
Unfortunately, there is a historic district, and it's not really been enforced or maintained in that area. We would describe it as Lawyers Row. I think everybody knows it as now. But in reality, that's Pioneer Heights. That's the first suburb of Las Vegas from 1905. There was a second train auction. So there's a lot of real good, charming property in that area. Just hasn't really been maintained well.
And so did you work with, was there no reason to work with the Historic Preservation Commission?
No, we totally took it upon ourselves.
I'm sorry, what?
All the preservation that was there, we took upon ourselves to do. There was no requirements for preservation whatsoever. In fact, I think everybody was a little surprised I didn't knock those things down.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I just wanted to say that Grant has a good track record here in Boulder City. So we appreciate that.
Well, thank you. As far as Boulder City goes, we have become very good at events. That's kind of what we're known for. We don't have a huge population, but several times a year, our population explodes during times like Art in the Park, Bike Festival, Dillinger Block Party, Shane Patton Pub Crawl, Worst Fest, Spring Jam. That's kind of what we do. We do events. And this would provide the opportunity for a great deal more events and the infrastructure, more importantly. Setting up for a day or setting up for a weekend, there's a tremendous amount of cost in mobilization, in installing portable restrooms and bars, and this would provide an opportunity to have that infrastructure in place, which which in turn allows us to do a tremendous amount more events, which feeds the local economy without tremendously increasing the population, which Boulder City has been very adamant about keeping our population small. And to the historic preservation specifically, that's what we do. We are in the business of appreciating old structures, and I envision an old bomber used as a lighting rack for the stage lighting. I envision, and by the way, credit to the other applicants that had similar ideas with murals. The building is beautiful and it lends itself to that, and I firmly believe that an event venue is the highest and best use for that structure.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
I'll have questions too, but I'm gonna wait for everybody and then I'll make some comments. But thanks, Grant. Thank you guys both. Yeah.
Cheers.
Thank you very much.
I have
I'm sorry.
a few things I'd like to say. So again, as with the last proposal, you have 3 phases that totals 44 acres, which is double the amount that was requested in the RFI. And a great portion of that is, for housing of one kind or another, whether it be mobile or fixed. So I feel that's inappropriate. But what I can say is that there are some aspects of this proposal that I feel would be very beneficial. One of the things I really like is the velodrome, and unfortunately you've got that's not even in the area that's being proposed in the RFI. I think the velodrome, I don't think an ice rink will bring people to Boulder City, but I think a velodrome would bring people to Boulder City. We've got Bootleg Canyon. We've already got a lot of bicycle enthusiasts that love to come to Boulder City, and there's a ton of bicyclists in Las Vegas, road racers who would appreciate a velodrome, and I'm just disappointed to not see that located on the property in question. I like Grant's ideas for the hangar itself, and I trust Grant and his track record. If anybody could do it, I'm sure you could do it, Grant.
Thank you, Ray.
But however, I don't support the mobile housing. I mean, if that's requested an RFI for housing, then that's one thing, but that's not what was asked for. And I would be happy to see that velodrome on the property. That's the kind of thing that I think will bring people to Boulder City. And that was the purpose of the RFI, to find an adaptive reuse for the hangar and bring people to Boulder City. So I'm just disappointed that you all didn't focus on that instead of housing.
Thank you. One of the things that we did focus in phase 1, the velodrome, I would love to talk more about the velodrome. This is just for historic preservation, so I didn't want to go into too much detail there. I also just didn't want to scare the city by, saying that we're going to bring a monorail here or something like that. Everything that we proposed, I've either had some experience in or we know the right people to tap to execute. And so everything that we've been trying to approach has been through being able to deliver what we're proposing. And in phase 1, although we don't have the velodrome, we do have a cyclocross event space as well. And from what I understand, I haven't seen any of these races, but they're quite entertaining and quite competitive and have a big following as well. So there is a competitive biking element even in phase 1.
Also, Ray, if I might, to your point about being maybe presumptuous to address the site as a whole rather than just what was laid out in the RFI, it was that question was asked of the city, and which is why we put future phases that they said that they would entertain the proposal for future development. We didn't put a whole lot of emphasis on that, but we did address specifically the RFI because we did want to follow the guidelines. That being said, we also wanted to leave the door open to potential future development, and the and to your point as well of the, we've become a bicycle community. Bootleg Canyon is a monster. And I feel like our proposal connects, it has the potential to connect Bootleg Canyon to Bullock Field to downtown and encourage more bicycle use throughout. I could see a time, and especially as luck would have it, being in such close proximity to All Mountain Cyclery, which seems to be just the hub. That is where bicyclists come in. That seems to be where they stop, get whatever gear they need for the day, and then they head out. And we're in perfect proximity to that. As far as the housing element, it's very early, and we welcome the discussion.
Another point, I agree with Ray. I didn't like the mobile homes either.
Yes, I'd just like to say, I wish you had just stuck to the RFI in question. We're the Historic Preservation Committee, and we're concerned mostly with the old hangar, and that was the purpose of the RFI. And I think you've taken it a little bit too far. I can easily get behind the velodrome and your ideas for the hangar, Grant. So I'd just like to say I do support that use. I'd like to see the hangar being used for as a place where the public can go and use and see and be a part of. And I find the idea of a velodrome to be a very exciting idea that would be appealing to Southern Nevada, not just Boulder City.
Agreed.
Thank you for the input.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on now to the Litchkins Commercial LLC.
Good evening. I'm Stuart Litchins, Boulder City resident and property owner at 1495, 1497 Boulder City Parkway.
I'm Caleb Gray. I own the Boulder City RV, which is directly north of the hangar.
So first, thank you guys for the opportunity. We've been trying for 10 years as I own and operate Boulder Boats, which occupy the space which is adjacent to the hangar. Still do, and we moved out 2013 or 14 just because we outgrew the space. We tried for years and years to get the hangar, and it just never worked out. So really excited for the opportunity here. Not excited to follow Grant because everything he does is awesome. And so anyhow, so we took an approach which is very different. First, I'd say we colored within the lines, but anyhow, we took an approach of starting honestly with the selfish interest is we want the use of the hangar. And right now, my motivation of the use of the hangar is to sustain Caleb's business, which he's successful at. He's doing a great job. He's outgrown it, just as we have. So he's going to shortly be looking, or he already is, looking for more space. And this is a solution to keep that there and to keep a stable business in Boulder City in this location, of which is really important to notice and take note of is the taxable revenue generated from a dealership type of facility. So that benefits the state and the city specifically, and it does draw people to Boulder City. It did for us for boats, and it does for Caleb for RV sales. But so in our effort to try to put together a plan that's going to motivate the city to consider us, because we haven't done the sexy things that Grant's done and that other developers have done, and quite honestly, I'm not a developer. But I feel I'm pretty good at solving problems, and so we kind of looked at what is the city void of right now? What is a possible solution? For a year, I've lived here for 15 years, and I know it's been on and off the table, is the on-street parking. So for us, what we did, and this is not a revenue center at all for us, but what it is a solution to a problem that maybe makes our proposal a little bit more attractive to the city. And so what we would propose is to take the first phase is for us to move in, operate service out of the hangar, preserve the hangar, to what it was a maintenance facility. I mean, that's what his hangars are. That's what for storage and maintenance. We'll be using it for the same, so we have no intentions of gutting it, of altering it, of doing anything to it other than using it for what its original purpose was, and that would be for boat and RV maintenance, not airplanes, obviously. But so our next phase takes us to what we call the community storage. And how this addresses the historical society or the historical preservation is our proposal is to offer free storage for vehicles for residents that are in the historic district in Boulder City. That these houses don't have the RV parking. They don't have Boulder City. Quite honestly, has a shortage of storage as it is right now. So, with subsidizing from the city, which is essentially just not charging us rent for the city piece, that we would administer, we would facilitate the storage, do the build out of the storage, maintain the facility, and organize storage for residents, first of the historic district, and then potentially go on to the other streets that have congestion that are identified by the city. So we looked a little bit outside of the designated RFI of how else can we help preserve the historic value of Boulder City. And that's just in an informal interview with a number of Boulder City realtors. They all emphatically agree that pulling a lot of RVs and boats off the streets, especially in the historic district, would not only increase values, but increase property turns and just be better for the community as a whole, as well as the residents. So in the past, it's always been kind of a punitive thing. You can't park on the street. Well, then what do you do? So we've provided a solution for that. So our next phase then is to have a storage facility, which there is no covered storage anymore in town. It's essentially effectively sold out and has been for years. So that's fulfilling a need that obviously is fulfills our needs as well as a boat dealer and as an RV dealer. So the economic vitality of our project isn't dependent on trying to draw traffic from Vegas, which my background's in advertising, specifically in tourism advertising in Las Vegas, and I know what it takes to compete for that tourist dollar. And so to draw people from the Strip down to Boulder City to an off the beaten path venue is a very challenging and very expensive proposition. So for us, we're not dependent upon, as we already have a viable business here, that this is just going to help bolster that. So the other thing that we felt that Boulder City needed, and as I've spent 4 years on a Chamber of Commerce on the board of directors, and we never had a solution, and that was for short-term camping and for short-term RV, like motor coach facilities. So we've allocated a specific portion of that, and throughout this whole property, through these phases, our intention is we're both pilots, so we have an affinity towards aircraft and aviation, and so we would actually take enjoyment in doing all our markings as taxiway signs and using the markings as the runway and kind of trying to preserve and keep a theme there, because otherwise, quite honestly, restoring a hangar in the middle of some other project is a hangar, and it kind of, so this will be like, why is there runway markings here? Why is this? And it's like, well, because this is Bullock Field. This is the history of Bullock Field. And so throughout the property, we can give, the monuments and type of plaques and just kind of a nod to the property's history. And so that's kind of our intent with it. Some of the other things that to me was so frustrating while I was really involved in the city and working with Chamber of Commerce was, it says right behind you, home of Hoover Dam. Hoover Dam visitors come here and leave here. They don't stay here. But we have 8 million visitors coming to Lake Mead. Those people come and stay for days. They go to Grant's restaurants, they go to the stores, they shop, and they stay, but we don't accommodate them. If you have a boat behind you, you have very few options of where you can park, where you can stay. So our intent would be to work with all the hotels and motels in town to offer temporary storage for larger vehicles, for trailers, for boats, that kind of thing, for secure storage, which is kind of a problem. Like if you try to go to the Lake Mead Lodge and you have your boat and you have $1,000 surfboards and all the skis and all this other stuff, the chances of it being there in the morning are not good. So you're left with this problem. So now we can now offer this where the hotel has offsite storage where people can drop their boats or whatever. So that's trying to accommodate more of the tourism and getting the Lake Mead traffic to Boulder City is something that I've always been very passionate about. Selfishly being a boat dealer, of course I am. But so that's the other kind of solution we were looking for. So that's essentially our kind of where we're heading with it. It is still RFI, so these are ideas. Ours are very viable, not very expensive, and not very intrusive to the city. They will bring tourism through the camping, through the expansion of the RV dealership. On a daily basis, there's people coming to Boulder City that wouldn't be coming here otherwise to shop the RVs, just as they did for us with boats, and we bring people from all over the country and all over the world. So, anything you want to add, Caleb?
Just to address directly, just to direct directly to the actual historical preservation of the hangar, phase one would absolutely include, a preservation back to what it looked like on the exterior from, or what we can get from the 40s or 50s. Several photos that we've looked at or we found in the archives have an all-white exterior with the red doors, and it's bright. You would be able to see it from Adams and even possibly down towards the airport, towards the new airport. We'd also have, I think, we put on the RFI, a mural painted on the side, home of the Hoover Dams, very similar to the Boulder City symbol. And that really the goal is, we're not exactly sure how many people will come specifically to visit an 8,000 square foot building. It's not, it's not a 100,000 square foot venue. It's 8,000 square feet. It's, 80 by 100 and so the reality is what can we do with that space? That space was a service facility, but we can make the outside look like, like it was, 40 years ago. The other thing that our project does is gives the historic district and the residents in the historic district the ability to take some of that congestion away, which undoubtedly would help the city.
Okay. Any comments from the committee?
Well, the same thing, and we've heard all of them now. I can make comments, or we can start with the whatever you like.
Well, okay. What we can do now, we can take, if you want to comment about this project, that's fine. What I'm going to do next is open it up for public comment since we've heard all three presentations. So would you like to comment now?
No, that's fine. Go ahead. Let's hear from the public first.
Okay,
That's
how about
fine.
you, Ray?
Well, I'd like to say, I think
Okay.
you should say a few words for
All right.
Charles, did you want?
Well, okay, and then I'll go ahead. Because I need to read some of these things, but I want to make some general comments first of all about the process here. Some of the process that I think is going to go on that may impact any of these proposals. Okay, and that's the fact that. And this is the next item coming up, actually, is we have a presentation concerning the Historic Preservation Committee goals. And two of the goals that are going to be discussed, one of those goals is, let me see where it is. One of the goals is to conduct a citywide reconnaissance and/or intensive survey to identify historic and cultural places that are historically significant. And upon completion of that survey, the goal would be to complete appropriate city, state, and/or national register nomination forms for historic and cultural places. This survey will, of course, include Boulder Field Airport. This goal, by the way, is echoed in the Boulder City Strategic Plan 2020 to 2025 strategy number 3, which says explore adding new historic preservation districts. Another one of the proposals we have is to work with and support. Now these are proposals for goals, okay? Work with and support city to amend existing codes, charter, and programs to achieve historic preservation goals and comply with CLG and SOI standards. This goal is likewise echoed in the Boulder City Strategic Plan 2025, strategy number 4, which says amend existing codes to achieve historic preservation. The reason I bring this up is that if as a result of these proposed surveys and changing the codes, let me just read this. If as a result of the proposed survey of potential historic places, Bullock Field is recognized and listed on one of these historic registers, and if the Historic Preservation Committee city goals of amending existing codes are achieved, then Boulder City's status as a CLG may require that certain standards defined by the Secretary of the Interior must be met for the restoration of Boulder Field. So my point is that there's a process that is hopefully going to begin very soon that will evaluate Boulder Field and its historic value. And if that's done, there's going to be certain requirements that will apply to all of you or anyone that wants to work with the hangar. Now I'm speaking about the airport itself, okay? We're not talking about workforce housing and all of those sorts of things. So I just wanted to make that point, but sort of specifically to some of the concerns I have with basically with all three of the proposals. First of all, I believe all three of the proposals would probably satisfy the requirement to preserve the exterior features of the hangar. And I think that's very important because from a historic preservation standpoint, that's basically what we're looking for. So in my estimation, it really doesn't matter what goes on inside the hangar as long as the exterior is preserved, because from a historic preservation standpoint, we don't deal with interior, modification, okay? So I'm happy with all three of the presentations in that regard. I will mention, however, that the Dandy Horse Ranch proposal mentions the possibility of having some attached buildings for restrooms or whatever outside the hangar. Now that might be problematic from a historic preservation standpoint if you're modifying the outside of the building. But the other concern I have, and it applies to some degree to all of you, and maybe to a lesser degree to some, is that the Bullock Field Airport includes the runway. And to me, the runway is a very important component of the historic Boulder Field Airport. The concern I have with both the grants proposal and the one from Rob Martin is that if the and again, I'm going by what I see on the diagrams. I think that the integrity of the runway might be severely compromised by some of these additional features, okay, the housing and et cetera, which we aren't supposed to talk about apparently. But I do want to talk about it to the point that if they infringe on the airport runway, I think they are of concern to the Historic Preservation Committee. Now, I like, from what I understand about velodromes and things like that, that might be compatible with preserving at least the feel for the fact that there was a runway there. And the same with, I know you guys got stuck standing up there, but you can sit down if you like. The one thing I like about your proposal is, like you say, you colored within the lines, okay? You don't have 40-some or acres of proposal here. You stayed within it. And I think perhaps that some of the proposals you have, especially from what your presentation was here, is that you can maintain some of the character of that runway, at least to the extent that we know that it was a runway at one time. And for that matter, I will say even Rob's proposal, they do have a green belt noted on part of one of their drawings. And again, that might be sufficient to at least indicate that there was a runway there. But I am disturbed about things like building a huge amphitheater in front of the hangar, because to me that destroys the character of the airport. Okay, I mean, I understand the concept of some kind of an amphitheater. In fact, I think something like that might go with Grant's proposal of having events. I mean, if you have a nice sound stage but I don't know that can't be done through temporary bleachers and so on, rather than building a huge, massive feature. So since we aren't supposed to address the other, and I wouldn't anyway, because I don't have any particular expertise to comment on the viability of any of these plans in terms of economic viability. So I will confine myself just to the historic preservation. And I think all three of them have some problems. I think all three of them have some good points. So I appreciate you guys coming, all of you, and giving us a spiel. I think that's really all I want to say. I don't. Yeah, I think that pretty well takes care of what I have to say. Yeah, thank you.
In your presentations, I think the markers are a good way to preserve that runway idea. I think that's a very creative idea.
And just so you know, with intent, the reason why the short-term campground was there was due to the runway. I mean, that is really, the intention is when you go check in for your 3 or 5 day trip, you're going to take taxiway A to runway 26 or whatever it is.
And I appreciate that. I think that's important. I know part of the existing runway out there are these, I don't know how many there is, 6 or 8 or 10 concrete pads. I don't know whether those were T-hangers or tie-downs. I know Paul would know what they are, but yeah, I think actually those are neat features. I don't know what you do with them, but they're neat. they're
The runway is, I mean, for us, we don't have $30 million, so we're using what we've got, and so that is actually the roadway to the storage spots, you know, that are adjacent to that. So, you know, our intent is to use what's there. Yeah. So.
Okay, thank you very much.
Offer some comments?
Wait.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, is that you, Blair, down there? Okay, Blair, go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead. If you could stay for a minute.
Hi there. I decided to wait till the end to address all three proposals, but I want to piggyback off of what Charlie was saying, and that is, yes, we definitely, that is on our agenda to reevaluate, or I should say evaluate and inventory the hangar property, and just like Charlie said, the property boundary will probably most likely include not only the hangar, but the runways as well. It may also include the terminal, which is now, of course, the Elks Lodge. But as far as the overall boundary of the Bullock Field site, it's not just the hangar. With that in mind, again, Charlie, you hit it right on the perfectly, where the preservation of the runway is, I think, an important component, a character-defining feature of that historic district that should be maintained. So I'll just start with the first proposal. The housing seems to be the emphasis with that proposal, and doesn't seem to really address the public purpose, which is to draw new visitors to Boulder City. the proposal for the hangar, I didn't hear much in the way of, I mean, I heard about the proposal for the hangar, but not necessarily for the rest of the property as far as preservation of the runway. Although you did see on the drawing the linear park, and perhaps the community garden is also kind of a linear feature, and I appreciate that. I think that's a really good idea to perhaps emphasize that linear runway feature there. As Ray said, we already have an amphitheater, so it just doesn't seem, it seems completely unnecessary for that site, and I don't think the amphitheater seems to help promote the preservation of the hangar, if not the property as a whole. The proposal, I didn't see any demonstrated past preservation or adaptive reuse work from that group, so that would have been beneficial to see that. For the second proposal, I really liked the idea of the venue concept. I think the property is definitely a really good candidate for that type of use. And the examples that were provided are definitely comparable as far as adaptive reuse is concerned. And especially I was really intrigued by the Germany example, where there's the combination of the event venue, and in fact it was multiple events, which is really kind of super cool rather than just one purpose, right? It's got a number of different activities going on there, including, of course, biking, which is, something that's definitely an existing trend and need here in Boulder City. So I really like how they focused on that activity, and to expand upon that activity that I think would be super popular and a real benefit to Boulder City. And again, Charlie, you hit it right as well, as far as I wish there was a little bit more from that proposal in regards to adaptively reusing or highlighting the runways in that proposal. As a biking venue, I think the runways could be somehow incorporated into that. And then for the third proposal, I really liked the idea of the concept as a whole is pretty minimal to the site as a whole. It's a sensitive treatment of the property, the hangar, the runway. It's a minimal impact, and therefore it's a good solution for the use of that property. But I really like the idea, although this doesn't necessarily maybe this point of their proposal whereby they're providing RV and boat storage for Boulder City residents. That doesn't necessarily bring in more visitors. However, their camping idea does. So I thought that was a really good idea. So thank you all for your proposals. They were all, I really appreciate them. They all have, like Charlie and others have said, some really good ideas, and some that just don't seem compatible, and so we'll just keep working on this, I guess. I'm wondering what the next steps are as far as these proposals, and if there's anything more that the Historic Preservation Committee can do to provide input for any of these proposals. Thanks.
Okay, Ray, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to say on the Boulder RV proposal, I really like it, and like Blair said, it's a minimal, it's not going to cost $30 million to do, and it's practical, sensible, and I love the idea of the hangar being used in that way for maintenance and repair and people working in there. I really like that idea. I also like the idea of the space for boats and storage to try and alleviate the congestion on Boulder City streets. I would just be concerned that local boat storage or storage people might find the subsidized nature to be disagreeable. You might meet some opposition to that aspect of it, but I really like what you want to do there.
Linda, I want to make one more comment because I forgot to mention that because that was one of that third one. I drive through the old avenues. In fact, I'm working on a plan to present a walking tour through the avenues for the next Historic Preservation Day. And one of the most objectionable things that there is in those neighborhoods are all the on-street parking of boats and RVs and four-wheelers and whatnot. And I understand what the problem is. I mean, there isn't any place else to park them. So I really like the idea of some effort anyway to, my neighbor, by the way, has a boat that's been parked in front of his house for 15 years and hasn't moved. And I think that's, he needs to put that somewhere else. So, but anyway, I do like that. I meant to mention that part. I do like the idea of making some attempt to solve that problem of on-street parking of RVs and boats and whatnot. So, thank you.
Okay, very good. At this time, we're going to ask for public comment. But what we want, if you come forward for public comment, please tell us your name so clearly for the record. Thank you very much. Anybody want to make public comment?
I have one question. Stuart Litchens. So this being an R5, and this is more about the process, I feel like the next step is it's going to go to RFP, which then will open it up to the general public, which I kind of feel like we've just all laid out our cards for anybody else to come and throw their hat in the ring. Kind of, is that where we're at with RFP after this then, or what is the next progression?
Okay, Michael?
So regarding next steps, and again, as has been emphasized, this is requests for information. Because there was a lot of interest in the hangar and because the city wanted to have a very transparent and open process in evaluating ideas regarding the use of the hangar and the adjacent runway, that's the reason for the RFI. The next step in the process would be taking this to the city council and having the same presentation by the three applicants before the city council. I would incorporate the input by the Historic Preservation Committee, and it'll be up to the City Council to decide, do they have interest in these ideas? And if so, what would they want the specific request for proposal to say? Again, this is an opportunity to have people respond with their general ideas. It would give the council the chance to more narrowly define if they're interested in what a request for proposals would be.
And then at which time anybody's available to kind of take all of our legwork and present their own plan, correct?
Again, as a transparent process, the intent was to generate ideas, and certainly anybody would have the opportunity to respond to that RFP.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, my name is James Clutterbuck, and my wife and I moved up to Boulder City last December. We fell in love with this little town. And we moved in a new build called the Cottages, which I think probably you're all familiar with. So I'm going to admit to a little bit of self-interest in regards to these projects. As was mentioned by you see your neighbor's boat parked in his driveway for 15 years. My patio overlooks the airfield, the landing strip. I don't want to go outside and see 100 boats on that landing strip there. I'm hoping that these projects will integrate and have some consideration with the people who've purchased homes there, because I love that airfield and I love that view and I love seeing the hangar, but I would like something that makes it possible for us to still be able to appreciate that beauty, have some amount of privacy, and also have it be good for the town.
Thank you. Any other public comment at this time?
Judy DeShane. I liked the proposals. It was interesting. I'd read all the paperwork that was with the stuff. And I guess I would have to say I probably liked the boat proposal the best. My reasons being, I'm concerned about the people that live close. If you have a venue there and you have a concert, even a small one, 1,500 people is not a large count, concert by any means. But if you have that going on in the hangar, and I can see people being very upset when all this noise is filtering into their house or their yards, and we do have quite a bit of time during the year when it's very pleasant to sit out on your patio in the evening and have a drink. So I would be concerned about the neighbors having to, if you had that much venue. And then even with some of the mobile home or camping and stuff like that, I would encourage it, but I would encourage them to set some hours so it isn't a lot of dust and noise and comings and goings. I mean, most camping areas, the quiet time starts at 10 o'clock, so I would like to see that happen in those if they did the camping. And if the proposal mentioned tent camping, which is going to generally be quieter than mobile homes or motor homes rather, because you carry everything with you and you have to set it all up and you're in a tent, so usually it gets dark or thereabouts and people start winding down for the day because they're up early because of the sun coming up. So I think I like that one the best, but it's probably more because of the venue, the concerts or stage events or whatever, and the noise and disruption to neighbors that are already there. And they've already bought their home, so it's not fair to ask them to move when something new moves into the neighborhood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment at this time?
Good evening. My name's Sonia Wilson. I'm a resident of Boulder City. I also live in the new development right adjacent to the airport. And I liked all the proposals. I wouldn't say I liked everything about the proposals. Most of the comments made here, either by the public or the committee, as far as the historic preservation, have merit. I think the first proposal had the green space, which was kind of the buffer between the residential and the Adams Boulevard. So that might be a compromise than having RV or boat storage right next to residential. Again, as someone already mentioned, that it's not something that is really preserving the historic nature of the site. And if you're going to do it as a long-term lease, maybe the airport should be more of the function of the historic information that's being preserved. You guys have a lot of things related to the dam already. The hangar certainly could be an event venue, which I wouldn't have a problem with living there, but maybe the residents in that neighborhood could also support that type of function as a multi-use, multi-purpose building. Could be rental space for startups, office areas, coffee shop, something that not just people coming from outside of Boulder City into Boulder City to attend. You could actually have residents that want to go there as well, because you're going to have to look at long-term viability. What else? I like the velodrome idea too. That's not a bad idea because of Bootleg Canyon, some of the space, and also because of the runway, the proximity might work. You could do a park and some of the things you were talking about as far as the naming that would work too, as far as preserving either whether it's the field information or the runways, taxiway information. So that's all I have. Thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you. All right, anyone else? Okay, sir.
Good evening. I'm Oris W. Munson, and I too live in the cottages, the new development that they just built. And there's a couple things that concern me is with the proposal, of course, we have a patio that looks out the back and we look at the runway and the mountains and everything, and that was the reason we bought there. I've lived in Boulder City 7 years and I was born in Vegas, so I like the idea of keeping Boulder small. We talk about that being a venue for events, and it just doesn't seem like a location for events to happen. I would think with the way that Boulder City was, that I don't know when the last time you guys put in a park, but it would be a beautiful place to put a park. I mean, some of the slides that we've seen with the airport, they have greenery and the runway and stuff like that. To me, it would make more sense to do something like that as far as that area. I can't imagine the runway with people coming up and down of that like a street behind our house. You know, that's just, I would think that there's something else that can be done with that, you know, as far as that goes. But that's all I wanted to say. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right.
All right, I thought I saw another hand back there. Okay, Glenn?
Good evening. My name is Glenn Fan. I'd like to thank all the people that took the time and effort to put all these proposals together. I'm sure they spent a lot of time and effort to do it, so a good attaboy to them all for taking the time to try and come up with ideas for preserving our hangar and stuff like that. And I thought they were all very interesting. They all had some really good pluses and very few negatives. But of the three, I would lean more towards the repurposing of the hangar for putting maintenance. It's a maintenance building. That's what a hangar is. You do maintenance in it. So I think it's kind of a fun idea to repurpose it in that respect. Get it painted back up to what it looked like when it was new, shall we say. And also just, I don't know if you ever noticed, but if you drive down Adams and stuff, you see that hangar. I'd like to be able to make sure you can continue to see that. You put a big amphitheater in front of it, well, then you lose sight of it from a good perspective going down Adams. And if it gets all painted up with the red doors and whatever is done, I think it'd be kind of fun for people when they drive by. That would stand out even more than what it does. So I'd lean more towards the third proposal. Now the other ones were good. Maybe some others, I don't know if it could ever be done. Work some bike paths in, along with theirs or something. I don't know. I mean, come up with something. But of the three, I think the last one I think would work better for the city. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment? Okay.
I do want to say one more thing.
Charlie?
You gotta excuse me, this is old age stuff, because Glenn reminded me, I also wanted to thank all three of you folks for putting the time and effort into, because I have been involved in putting bids together for projects of several $1 million, and it's a very time-consuming, stressful, tough thing to do if you're trying to bid competitively to win a contract. So I know it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, and thank all of you for doing that.
Oh, okay, we have more public comment.
My name is Brenda Detterman, and I'm also a resident of Boulder City, and I do live at the cottages. And I just wanted to make a suggestion or something that I had thought of. I did not send in a proposal because obviously I can't lease the building and I don't have the funds to do it. However, I do think that maybe to preserve the airport itself and just that small facility, I was thinking that you could maybe do something like the Disneyland Adventures soaring ride, that people could actually come and still have it be a airport museum and possibly go on the ride. It would be a smaller scale, but they could actually fly over the Hoover Dam and pretend you're at the Grand Canyon and go down through Vegas and keep it as historic as you could with the airport theme, or do a museum and including like flight simulators for kids or an aviation camp. So that was just my suggestion.
Thank you. Okay, did we get everyone now? Okay, and again, we want to thank all three presentations. It is a lot of work, and it's so encouraging to see our city brighten up and say, hey, we're going to do something with this historic building. It's very, very encouraging. Thank you so much for all of your time. All right, we're going to move on then to the possible action discussion on committee's future goals and priorities relative to the city council direction on July 9th. Some of you may know that the council has asked us to come up with our ideas for the future, and they gave us 2 meetings to discuss this. So we're kind of like in that discussion right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to have Blair, in our packet, there's attachment 1, attachment 2, and then attachment 3 is Blair's proposal. So Blair, if you could take this time and tell us about your proposals. I wonder if Blair checked
Sorry,
out.
I had you on mute.
Okay, Blair. Thanks.
Let me see. So basically, my proposal was taking what the tasks and ideas that we've had previously, as well as from our last preservation meeting, we had some really good ideas, some other tasks to accomplish. And I just felt as if it would be beneficial to put those needs, tasks, the strategy, and put it within the framework that the city's strategy is written in. So if you look at the far left column, those are the tasks for the Historic Preservation Committee to accomplish or to support, or that are in support of the city strategy, which is the second column. And then the proposed dates, those dates are what were proposed by the city. And then the proposed resources that I added as ideas or suggestions for how to accomplish the tasks that basically the city, these are city tasks, but the Preservation Committee should be in support of the city's strategy. And so those were my ideas, I guess, for how to accomplish those without the city having to hire staff or additional staff, as was requested in the past. So I don't know if there's anything more I can say. I mean, I don't know if you wanted to go through each task or not, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory. What I tried to do is pretty much break down that we're not only supporting the city in their strategy, but it's basically providing some hints, I guess, on how the city can perform those tasks or that strategy, but then how the Historic Preservation Committee can assist in the city reaching their strategy.
Okay, we're going to use Blair's attachment 3 as a base. So is there anything you want to add after reading this? It's quite intricate, and I think it's a good plan. But if there's some additions, please speak up now, because this will go to the council. And when is the next meeting what day do they require this?
The date has not been set. It was just a requirement that over the next two Historic Preservation Committee meetings, that the Historic Preservation Committee would come up with the committee's recommendations to forward on to the City Council for historic preservation priorities.
So we're doing our job. We're on task. So anybody else have anything to add while we're at this?
Had to hit the button. Well, I don't quite know how we're going to. My understanding was that we were going to rank these items on some sort of priority list, and I love what Blair has done, but now if we have to give the council a list of priorities, do we need to be more specific about items? I guess that's the question I have. I mean, all of the things that Blair has done here, I believe, are on the list that we have that Michael or Susan, whoever put in our packet. But the items that are in our packet that are listed are much more abbreviated, and I don't know whether we need to just. I mean, let me just use an example. Blair's got on her second page, I think it is, review BC Boulder City 1998 Historic Preservation Plan. Well, that is an item. We have that somewhere, I think, on the, or maybe it isn't. I thought it was. Well, it's essentially evaluate the 2000 Historic Preservation Ordinance. So anyway, I don't know whether we want to give the city council this entire document that Blair has put together, or whether we want to have specific goal items as listed in our packet by. I guess, do you understand what I'm saying, Michael?
Can I,
ahead,
I guess, let me elaborate and say that the prioritization is based on the proposed dates. So if you're looking at strategy number, 4 and 5, well, that's not a priority until later in the year, or, 2 years from now, let's say. So it's basically prioritized by date.
Oh, I see. Okay. Oops. Probably should turn that on.
Which is how the city's strategy is organized by date. So that's, in my opinion, how the city has prioritized their strategy, is by they're going to accomplish A, B, and C by such and such a date, and therefore it's prioritized by date.
Okay. Well, we can always add to what Blair has put together. It's very well done. It's got the committee strategy, it's got the city strategy, and then the dates, and then the proposed resources. So it's very well done. I think we could probably use that as a base, and then if there's anybody else that has something to add, we could, like, for example, the Janus report, I was looking at that. Is that included in your, I know this is so detailed. Is that included in this at all, the Janus report? What you wrote up, Blair?
There's no need to review it. What it needs to have done is it needs to be revised.
Okay.
And I believe that is under, so that's goal number, or strategy number 3.
Okay.
Which is, and it's the 4th bullet, I think, complete citywide historic context statement that expands upon the previous historic context, which is the Boulder City Historic District.
Okay. Does anybody else have questions for Blair as far as like your goals that you feel are prioritized, you want to proceed with? anything you want to add to Blair's?
Well, I think that Blair has pretty much covered everything that I would like to see happen, and I'm really grateful to her for putting this together, and I really think this should go to the council and the city manager, and I think it's very reasonable, it's very sensible, and it covers just about everything in my mind. I don't have anything I'd like to add to it or take away from it. I think it's perfect.
And I will say that, let me also add that there are two concepts at the very beginning that are not city strategies. I guess they should have been under the preservation committees. Well, no, it's something that the city will, I think, or I would recommend that the city add to our historic preservation committee meetings, that there's a standing agenda item that we, at every one of our meetings, that we address the city's strategic goal and those strategies that, depending on the dates, and then how is the Historic Preservation Committee supporting the city's strategy. And that, so the only way that would work is, I think, that the city has that on our agenda so that we can comment and keep an eye on the city's strategy, but also the Historic Preservation Committee's strategy for supporting the city's preservation goals.
I think you're right, Blair. It does need to be on the agenda, and that's a way that we can track what you've put together here. So is everybody in agreement with that?
Yeah, now that I look at this, I hadn't really paid that much attention to the proposed dates, which I should have. And now looking at the dates, I understand, because just to pick an example, the very first one is
Develop a
very
mission
first
date?
one on Blair's list is to be completed by October 30th
That's right
of
away.
this year. So we're running out of time.
Yeah.
Or somebody's running out of time.
To develop a mission statement.
Yeah, the mission statement. So that should be, so I understand, right, yeah, Blair, I get it now. So the priority is based on the date, yeah, and that's great, yeah. Yeah, because that gives us a good firm handle to, yeah.
Anything you want to add? Great. You're okay with it? Okay. How about you, Alan, down there? Can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a few comments. Anyway,
okay.
Yeah, at first, I spent quite a bit of time with, Michael's list and also Blair's approach to this. And, I think that, Michael's list was a very good one. It had all our approaches. But it basically, like the first three lists, A, B, and C, talking to people involved in the history of historic preservation in Boulder City, those are the three probably, hardest pulls. I mean, because, we're basically talking about mandatory efforts. But all of these things can be done, some of these things can be simultaneously. But looking at Blair's proposal, what I like about Blair's proposal, that first of all, we start with a kind of a mission statement, kind of a, where do we go from here? And it, she includes everything on this thing, but it also has a lot of room for review of the BC Historic Preservation Plan, the 1998 plan, review of the Henderson, and she also looked at maybe looking at other cities' plans as a way of, evaluating our current needs and everything. And it's, and there's a lot of, and we're incorporating our strategic plan with this, which we all worked hard on, and I think she incorporates it very well. So I'm really pleased with what Blair has done because it lays out a timeline. And it also calls for, some city health. And what I like about this thing, like in your strategy too, Blair, develop a historic preservation plan, it calls out what, what is maybe beyond the scope of maybe the committee and what we need some help with as a committee, and what are responses. And when you lay it out what Blair has done, I think it's a good balance of what this committee is capable of doing and what our expectations of what we should be doing and our expectations of what the city should be doing. So I tend to agree, after spending quite a bit of time looking at Blair's plan laying out, because I think it follows some of the same things that Michael has listed on his priority list, yet it kind of gives a timeline and it gives a logical progression on how we should approach these. So I tend to say I'm all for Blair's plan.
Okay, all right, then we'll go ahead and adopt this plan then, and do we need to make a motion?
Well, I think we probably should.
Yes,
Okay,
making
all
a motion with your recommendations to move forward onto the city council.
Okay, all right, then I need somebody to make an motion that will use Blair's plan as a base, and then any other comments that we made tonight will be included, that's forwarded to the city council. Want to do that, Ray? Okay.
I'll propose a motion that we proceed with Blair's plans here.
And I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Okay.
Aye.
Motion carried. And then we'll send this on through Community Development Director Michael Mays onto the City Council. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next possible action item is review and recommendation. You know what? Is there any other feedback from public comment on any of this? I don't know how many of you have read it or, okay. All right, then we'll go ahead and move on. Review and recommendation on a proposed remodel, a new garage at 1341 Denver Street, relative to the adopted exterior design guidelines for that area and for accessory buildings.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chairman. The new owners of 1341 Denver Street are going to be doing a substantial remodel to the home, basically to address a number of past code violations on the property and solving some problems such as not having an interior stairway to the basement level. They'll be getting rid of an illegal apartment in the basement and basically, as you can see from the plans, doing an entire remodel plus adding a new garage in the backyard. As the committee knows, the only time projects have to come before you for residential is if they don't comply to all of the adopted guidelines. And so the staff report mentions the items that don't conform to the adopted guidelines in terms of the proposed wall finish, roof changes, roof material, getting into some details about exposed rafters and purlins at the gable eaves, windows, and changes to the front porch. However, for this existing house, the much of it is not already in conformance. It's not an example of a home that does represent what it's supposed to. It already has a stucco finish and bay windows that had been tacked on that have nothing to do with the original design of the home. In fact, the 1983 nomination referred to the home as having irretrievable architectural integrity and that it was non-contributing to the context of the historic district. So the applicant's architect, the approach they're taking, while it doesn't completely conform to the guidelines, they believe that it will bring the home more in conformance to the guidelines than it is now.
Did you have anything to say?
I'm here to answer questions if you
All right.
Provide your name. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
I'll just give you a brief. So the house is very ugly right now, and they don't like it. So we're going to make the exterior of the house look more historical. And the roofing and everything, it still in my mind, it still conforms to the neighborhood around there because even though we didn't propose the shingle roof, directly behind them, there's a house with the clay tile roof, a red tile roof, and that's what they want to do is something like that. So we're not going far out before you see the very similar stuff also. So if you have any questions, I am more than happy to answer them for you.
Okay, anybody have any questions for our gentleman here? Oh, wait a minute. Alan, is that you?
Yes, that's me. I agree with you. Whatever you do to that house will improve the house right now. With the bay windows and the stucco, that house really sticks out. I just saw it come along that block. I have two requests or two suggestions for you. And I know that you're looking at behind your house, there's the tile roof, but along that style of that type of houses, and the original style, I would suggest that you use the asphalt roof, the asphalt shingles rather than the tile, which doesn't really conform to that particular house style. I know there's one at the end of the block and behind you, but along that street there, most of the houses have gone to the asphalt shingles, which kind of conform to the original look of the house. I mean, the houses of that type. And I think would make it blend a little bit more with the streetscape. So I know either it's an option, and one of the things that's going to be a lot cheaper for you than the tile roof. The second observation I have is is there in the north elevation, that's the elevation 1, the front north elevation, you have the horizontal hardy boards going to the right side of the house, but near the window you have vertical placement of that board. Now, there's no one in the historical district where we have vertical placement of the siding. Is there a particular reason why you have vertical siding there?
Yes. That elevation at that room actually is 2 foot off the front of the house. So they wanted to just make a differentiation to bring a different style to that. So it just didn't look horizontal all the way across. They wanted to go with a vertical board and batten at those particular windows just to give it a little bit different depth, I guess you would say, on the front elevation there. They're not 100% opposed to going all horizontal there, but we wanted to put a little bit different style just on that particular area.
Well, that would be my preference, is to go with the horizontal, just because it conforms with the original looks of the houses there, and it would just be, if your intent is to be more historical, like it said in the Janus report, it's kind of irretrievable, but you're retrieving a little bit closer to the original designs of the original homes. And I would prefer to see horizontal and the asphalt tile. Those are my comments. Besides that, I think it's making the house look, a lot better than it was before. Thank you.
I have a comment. First of all, I'd like to commend you because I think what you're doing is a tremendous improvement. That house is the ugliest house on that part of the block.
Couldn't agree more.
So I commend you for that. There are a couple of items that one of them is looking at the guidelines for landscape, and this applies. There's the two houses on farther to the northwest of yours, but the guidelines for that part of that street called for. Let me just read them. Grassy front yards, continuous parkways. City land between sidewalks and street is not interrupted by sidewalks or driveways. You're still maintaining that carport, as I understand it. So you
correct,
still have
yes.
that driveway,
Yes.
which is unfortunate. But I mean, I'm not going to make a big deal out of it, but I do want to mention that because that whole block has virtually ignored all of the guidelines that were given for for that block. And I do commend you guys it is going to be a tremendous improvement. So good luck with it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Ray, go ahead.
She's very quick to skip me. Have you noticed?
Yes.
She thinks I'm going to attack you all. Anyway, yeah, I'd just like to say as well that it's going to be a beautiful looking house, a great improvement. One of the things that I hope is going to happen in Boulder City is that it becomes trendy to resort to the original historic look. So you're going a long way towards it. You're almost there.
We tried to get it pretty close. It didn't exactly conform to it, but compared to what's there now, it's a 150% improvement.
Great. So I would encourage you to consider going with the shingles. You know, another house with the red clay tiles is just going to encourage more houses with red clay tiles. And as a committee, you know, historic preservation is our thing, and
Gotcha.
We would really, really appreciate it if you would consider switching to the shingles.
I won't
and
discuss it.
more will follow. You know, that if it's red clay tile, then it's likely that the next person's going to say they want them too. So hopefully you consider that. And I do agree with Alan on the Hardy board. You know. Personally, I think it would be more attractive if you kept it all the same. It just
And we're not
it looks out of place. It sort of looks something's off there to me. So I mean, it's not a big deal, but
They're not 100% opposed
Yeah.
to that one at all. If we switch that to horizontal, they're completely
Yeah.
okay with that. The red tile roof was something that they really wanted, but again, they're not. It's going to come down to cost at the end of everything, and they're spending a lot of money on this house to get it from where it is now to where they want it. So in the end, it very well could end up being, if it's a huge cost difference, that it could go to asphalt shingles automatically just due to the cost. But I can't make that decision for them. I will definitely relay this information to
encourage them, please. I'm sure my
I absolutely
compatriots here would agree.
I will absolutely relay that to the owners. And so, we haven't gone into working drawings yet, so we don't have all the plans ready to go to the building department yet. So we can still push and pull on exactly like the finishes. We can change those fairly easy still.
Great. Well, fair play to you.
Thank you.
I mean, the tile roof's going to be more expensive, but also down the road, I mean, I don't know how long the owners intend to live in that, but eventually all roofs need to be replaced. And to replace a leaky tile roof requires you take off all the tile and put, tar, replace shingles underneath. So replacement costs on a tile roof are also a lot more expensive. And fixing a leaky tile roof is much more expensive than fixing an asphalt roof, just for the cost benefit.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I agree with you, Alan, as far as the asphalt shingle roof would be an improvement, as well as the board remaining horizontal rather than vertical accent paneling. Curious if the roof, if it's possible to use exposed rafters and purlins. I'm not sure what the roof design will look like, but that's another important component. But I would also add the other component is the doors and windows and the trim around that as well should be considered. And that's all I have.
Okay. On the roof, we would be replacing the entire roof with new roof trusses that span front to back to make it easier to remodel the inside. It will have a double pitch on the front to give it that look where it'll go down at probably a 4 or 5 and 12 and then go to a shallower pitch across the patio across the front, so we still have that double pitched roof. The tails of the trusses, of course, will stick out and be exposed. Whether we put fascia board on there or leave just the tails exposed, that's not something that was 100% decided yet. I'm sure they're not opposed to leaving the truss tails exposed if that fits in more with the guidelines.
Can I make one more comment? Just
absolutely.
Do you know, are you aware of whether you or the owners have actually looked at the Chart 3C, which is the guidelines for the exterior?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I was just wondering because you go down the line and almost every one of them aren't met exactly. But I'm so tickled that it's going to be such an improvement over what's there.
Yes. That's the biggest thing is they bought it knowing that they were going to remodel it because they hated the way it looked, but they loved the location.
Yeah. I can't believe it didn't have a stairway from the top to the bottom.
No, you have to go around the outside, so we're going to add a stairway so they can actually get to the basement
They'll
without
be happy
walking
about
around
that.
the house.
Sounds like you have your hands full.
Yes.
Well,
I
thank
do.
you. Thank you for coming and sharing with us.
Thank you very much. You all have a great night. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Okay, next possible action, courtesy review of carport in rear yard of 1005 Arizona Street.
That blipped off right away. Thank you. Some of the members who've been around for a few years will recall that behind the police station there used to be what was called the annex building, and there was fire damage, so it had to come down. But before it did, the public works director at the time, was showing you what was going to be removed, and the committee had recommended that the south wall with its window treatment facade be saved, and so that was done. At the time, he mentioned that when the building itself was going to be torn down, that the area was going to, most likely be used for vehicle storage, because basically that yard behind the police station is, I guess, sort of an impound lot, for vehicles that have been taken or need to be examined as part of their duties. There's currently one shade structure in that back area, and you can just barely see the roof of it over the wall. And now the Public Works Department is going to be adding a second shade structure or carport adjacent to it. So you can see from the photos that it will also be barely visible from California Avenue. Again, this is one of those things that since was torn down was not historic, and a new carport isn't one of the features that are part of, that are addressed in the guidelines, because of course the guidelines pertain to the historic building. There's not really guidelines for accessory structures at the public buildings, but, we figured you'd probably be interested to at least know that it really most likely won't be any more visible to California Avenue than the existing cover is. So we just wanted to make you aware of it.
Okay, thank you. Any comments about that?
We left up there, and we appreciate that, and thank Public Works for sharing this with us. But it's great that wall stayed up and minimal impact. And nice job.
I have a question. Just to clarify, so will the shade structure be the same height as the existing shade structure?
I asked that of Public Works, and they said yes. Well, they said it would be similar. I don't know if it would be exact.
Can it be not any higher than the existing shade? Can that be a request from us?
Certainly, we'll be happy to pass that on, but to be honest, it may be something that they've already ordered, because I believe they were planning to install it, a few weeks ago, because apparently it had been on their list for about a year or so. The plans indicate, I guess, that the height, it looks like it's 10 foot 7 inches at the tallest part. That's probably very similar to what is there now, and they can possibly, I'm sure, cut down the posts if need be, but we will certainly pass that on as a recommendation.
It would be great if it was not any higher than the existing shade structure, only because it appears as if the existing shade structure is not blocking the second story windows or impacting the view of those windows, which you can see from the exterior.
The second story.
From the photos I'm looking at.
You mean the second story windows of the police station building?
Correct. I'm looking at the second photograph.
Well, or if you'll, oh, I see. You mean from the view from the alley?
Correct.
Okay, because I guess, yeah, we can certainly make that request, but of course, normally the parameters of the guidelines and committee review is for what is visible from a public street. But we can certainly.
The alley is also public, so it's visible to the public, so.
We will pass that along to the Public Works Department.
Thank you.
I want to make one little comment. This is sort of a little anecdotal thing, but they mentioned that this used to be, or in part was used as an impound lot by the police station. And I was walking down the runway at Bullock Field the other day, and the policeman came to check me out, probably because I was dressed inappropriately. I was a bum. I'm sure he thought I was. But anyway, he was telling me that the police department, for a time, used the hangar as an impound garage for, well, whatever they impound. So it was used by the police department at one time. So I thought that was interesting. That hasn't come up as one of the possible uses for the hangar, but.
Okay. All right, then, any other comments? All right, then we'll move on to number 7, discussion and update on the status of properties in the historic district. Any comments? Okay.
I don't have anything.
All right. Okay, we're at public comment again. Do we have any public comments? Looks like our audience has
We have any public?
gone home. Okay. All right, then for all practical purposes, our meeting is adjourned.
Blair, are you still there?
I am. Thanks, you guys.
You probably need to go to bed. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Thank you.
Night. Good
Alan, you take
Night.
care. Are you going to come back sometime?
Yeah, we miss you, Alan.
We miss you.
Okay, well,